Okay, we're going to begin with sexual fantasy, and this is the most common form of sexual activity. A lot of times people don't even think about it as a sexual activity because it feels like you're not actually doing anything. But, if thoughts are crossing your mind, that's a behavior. That's an activity, right? So fantasy is the most common form of sexual activity, and it has a lot of positive functions. Now here I have a cartoon where she's saying, "Good night, Arnold. Hello, George Clooney." So probably she shouldn't be saying that to Arnold. But if she's able to be more sexually responsive or adventurous or enjoy the activity more, there's nothing wrong with fantasizing about even someone else while you're with your regular partner, so long as you are not wishing you weren't with your regular partner, if you aren't using it as a way to escape reality because you don't like reality. But if it enhances sexual activity, there's nothing wrong. And in fact, there might be something positive about engaging in sexual fantasy during sexual activity. It has other positive functions also. It takes our minds off of stressful things. It gives us something to drive our desire during masturbation. It does all sorts of positive things for us. It builds creativity. So why fantasize? They did a study of respondents, and they found that 80% said that they fantasize in order to experience sexual arousal. Not surprising. 70% said that they were curious about sexual experiences or sensations, and so they sort of fantasized about doing them. 60% said that they had unfulfilled sexual needs, or that they wanted to temporarily escape from reality, or they wanted to express or fulfill a socially taboo sexual desire. So those three all tied for 60%. 56% said that they used fantasizing in order to plan out a future sexual encounter. 44% said that they wanted to relax or to reduce anxiety. 40% said that they were bored. 32% said that they wanted to feel more sexually confident. 30% said unfulfilled emotional needs. 20% said to block distractions during sex, and 12% said to compensate for an undesirable partner. Okay, so I think you probably picked up that you could select more than one choice on this survey, because this definitely adds up to more than 100%. But one of the things I really wanted to emphasize is that only down here at the bottom, 12% was to compensate for an undesirable partner. So the vast majority of the time it was, while the person was alone and they wanted to escape from reality, or they were bored, or they were trying to reduce their own anxiety or something. Other times they were with a partner and they were using it in order to make the experience more satisfying or more adventurous or something like that. Most people fantasize for basically positive reasons. I guess almost all of these could be construed as having a negative side to them also. But for most people, they're fantasizing as part of the, ramping up to sexual activity. Now, when is it a problem? Well, here we have two monks sitting on top of a mountain, and one says, "Are you meditating or fantasizing?" So assuming that meditating is their job, if it's interfering with things you're supposed to be doing, right? If you're supposed to be focusing on something else and your mind keeps wandering off into a fantasy, then that's problematic. If it's interfering with your actual relationship because you're so busy thinking about your fantasized relationships or your fantasized activities, that could be problematic. If there was a marriage fantasy league, would you be upset if I didn't draft you with my first pick? The wife asks the husband. Yeah. So it's a problem when the person is using fantasy to escape reality, right? If they really are that unhappy with the person that they're with, that they would have to fantasize just to be able to be, with them or intimate with them, that's a problem. So, for the most part, most people's fantasies are not problematic. Now, there are three main categories of sexual fantasy as revealed by Bogart et al. In 2015. So there are the kinds of fantasies that people have while having sex. And they find that there are really no differences in the kinds of fantasies that males and females report that they have during sex. So that's not a sex difference source. While masturbating and while daydreaming are the other two categories. In those two circumstances, there are sex differences. Males and females have different sort of objects of their fantasies when they're masturbating or daydreaming. Females are much more likely to fantasize about being the object of desire, whereas males are more likely to report fantasizing about being with a new partner or being with multiple partners. The picture on the right, I selected it on purpose, being what appears to be college students in class and daydreaming. They did a study of college students, and they found that about every 15 minutes, college students kind of stop listening to the lecture and start fantasizing about something. They actually asked the participants to write down the time when they discovered themselves in the middle of a fantasy, and then the general subject of the fantasy. They didn't need details, but they just wanted to know, was it a sex-related fantasy? Was it, a fantasy about, was it more of a daydream, like thinking about, what you have to do after class, or, a conversation that you had with somebody in the past and you're thinking about how it went, or, what were the main subjects of the daydreaming or fantasy? And so they found that, like I said, about every 15 minutes, college students stop paying attention to what's going on in class and they fantasize or daydream. And females reported that when they were having sexual fantasies, they tended to fantasize about their regular partner or a celebrity, whereas males tended to report that they fantasized about someone in the room. So a little bit more, difference that we're seeing between males and females as far as the content of their sexual fantasies, especially when daydreaming. All right, so women, like I said, tend to fantasize about famous people, their regular partner, and here's the study that I was referring to with the college students, Hicks and Leitenberg. Women's fantasies, when they do describe them, could be characterized as romantic or erotic. Remember, we talked about, that kind of love style, right? Where, there's a lot of like touching and attraction, but nothing really vivid as far as like X-rated content. Women are much more likely to report sexual fantasies that would be appropriate for daytime television. Males, on the other hand, are much more likely to think about whoever's right there. So he's thinking thoughts about her and she can read his mind. So that's kind of a funny cartoon, but yeah, more likely to think about whoever's there. And then Fullingstad and Kimbrell found that men's fantasies tend to be a lot more X-rated. And, if you can imagine, the camera angles would be a little more intimate and see your genitals and things like that, whereas women's fantasies don't usually star those kinds of visualizations. So there are differences in content in sexual fantasies between males and females on average. Now, that does not mean that any single woman doesn't ever think, X-rated thoughts, or that no man has, sort of these erotic daydreams that are a lot less, vivid, but that on average, males and females show these different patterns. All right. So up next in the playlist, I want you to watch this little clip. It's just the very first 1 minute of the clip. You'll see what I mean about male versus female fantasizing and why we may not want to share our fantasies with each other. So go ahead and check that out, and then I will come back and talk to you about that.